Rich, thank you so much for joining us to be on our show today.
My pleasure, BJ.
Yeah, so Rich, one thing we like to ask people when they first come on is just tell us a little bit about why you're passionate about sales. What is it about sales and teaching sales that makes you excited?
Boy, it's a loaded question, isn't it? It's a combination of 30 plus years in the sales industry. I was not going to be a salesperson. I was going into professional sports when I got out of college, and
Okay.
just so happens that my first job was a sales job. So I did get into professional sports, just not as an athlete. And it was funny as I went through my sales career, I had a buddy of mine who told me that why are you selling tickets for that organization when you can make some real money selling advertising? And I got into the sales training program and learned how to train them. It almost became like a coaching job,
Uh-huh.
which again put me back into that competitive slash athletic field.
Yeah.
And I just developed a passion for sales training. And when this job came along to get back into it, again, being back in the sales world, I jumped at the chance to help and to give back.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. So Rich, in this episode, we want to focus on kind of experiential learning. So that's one of the things we feel like you do really well in your class and kind of you have a reputation for. So tell us a little bit about some of the experiential learning you do in your class. So let's start off with one, which is the role play. So tell us a little about the role plays you do in your class, how you design them, and how you help students get excited about them.
When I first got here, the role plays were more, okay, you have to do it this way. And I found that people were trying to just copy each other in the role plays. So I kind of stepped back and said, the way I learned it is the best way to do this is to create your own script, and that way you own it. It's a lot better if you own what you're saying or what you're thinking rather than taking somebody else's words. So we developed this course. We give them 20 to 30 different businesses or service or products that they can sell, anything from real estate to medical sales. And they have to go and they have to do the research. So they have to actually learn the industry themselves. And a lot of these students that are in the class are looking at getting into professional sales jobs. So they're picking the area out that they believe or at least think that they want to get into. And they have to dive in and create the sales script. Now, our sales role plays, we have two different ones, each 8 minutes. And the first one is a discovery call. So they have to do research and find out about the industry and create questions that they can have a meaningful conversation with their partner.
Okay.
And I tell them that they should write the questions, but also write the answers out. Because you know as well as I do, if somebody's going into medical sales and they start asking technical questions, some of the answers that they're going to get are going to be like, whoa, what? it's,
Yes.
it doesn't, I saw so many different role plays go sideways because the person who was the sales rep was stumped by the answer. And it just threw it, you know, they're in the gutter now. So by creating the answers, they can have that meaningful conversation and at least practice it with them. And it goes a lot better. It's just a lot smoother by creating questions and then giving them the answers.
I like that idea. Go ahead. I was
I was
going
gonna
to say something, BJ,
just
on
one
that.
quick follow up. So do you give them kind of like an outline, or they just kind of write the script from scratch? Because I love that idea of they own it. Like you come up, you take the principles, you write a script, but how do you kind of help guide the students in the right direction?
So I give them a script that I helped develop with one of my previous colleagues here, and it's a whole different industry. And in fact, it's kind of ridiculous. It's all focused around doggy daycare, but you give them the kind of the nuts and bolts, or at least the structure, so that they know where to go with their questioning and how to kind of, I guess, guide the sales or direct where the sales call is going to go.
Go back to that idea of like the preparation. You're helping them. You're guiding them. What would you say the biggest challenge that students face when they're doing role play? Because I know when I was, and go back to your medical sales comment,
Hmm.
yes, I learned when I was selling EHR, you can't be smarter than a doctor. So
No.
it's a big no-no. um, but the other part to that too, though, is like you know writing the answers, and I love that practice because there's a lot of technical stuff that you need to understand. But the role play component, as you're saying, students when I first started teaching that as a adjunct professor and teaching them how to do role plays and to take advantage of practicing in class, you get some people who are just timid, you get people who are that clam up, or you get folks who become as those sales bros, right? They did some kind of sales and they're super confident and they are doing everything wrong, the sleazy sales positions. What are the biggest challenges you face with students or a new professor might face when they're doing role plays for the first time?
So there's a couple of different things. Number one, getting to the 8 minutes is probably the most difficult. And they get intimidated. So I've got to do 8 minutes. I have to be on a video for 8 minutes. That is like, they freak out. And it's great at the end of the class when you can ask them, or even let's say that one of my professional sales students is in a different class, and I ask them, "How did it go the second time?" They're like, "Oh my lord, it's so much easier the second time." So it's the initial fear of getting to the 8 minutes, and as the three of us know, telling is not selling. So that's what I stress is you've got to have great questions to get that other person talking because you're not there to just tell them about your product. That's not going to get you anywhere. So that's the hardest part is just like you said, you get that the people who think that they know what they're doing and they're doing it wrong because they're not asking questions. They're telling them what their answers should be.
Hmm.
And I ran into that all the time. Geez, the outdated industry of yellow page advertising, just being on sales calls and listening to people tell an air conditioning company what they need and what they should buy, it didn't go well. It was not good. You've got to let the other person answer the question.
I think that's a critical part where it's one of our guests earlier talked about SMBJ in our course where we talk a lot about that your goal is to be a listener. You listen more than you talk.
Yes.
And when you do that, the buyers oftentimes they will divulge problems, and especially like what BJ did there, before was that follow up questions. I think those are some of the things. It's hard to teach that in a textbook. It's better to teach that when they can actually do it. And when you ask a question and there's something deeper, be willing to ask that follow up question. And I think one of the things we pointed out is even sometimes it's awkward, right? To
Yeah.
I think those are the
Yeah.
best moments.
Well, we there, and I don't know if this is still rings true in the industry, but it goes 80-20, right? You
Hmm.
talk 20% of the time, you listen 80% of the time on a sales call. Now, what's realistic? Probably 60-40. You hope that they get to at least 55-45 in a real sales call. That's the hard part. If it's 50-50, I don't think you're doing enough digging.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting enough information out of the customer. And that's why I've structured it so that first 8 minutes is all just discovery.
Yeah.
You introduce yourself, you get them going, and then you just ask them questions and ask them questions.
One of the things
And
I find, one of the things I find
oh, I'm sorry.
most interest, one of the things I find most interesting in doing role plays with students is how often they say in my class, "Wow, that was really hard to not just jump in the first time they said anything that resonated with what my customer with what my product could do, like be able to answer questions." Rich, could you share like maybe any experiences you have teaching or just how you go about helping students understand the importance of the follow-up questions and the digging, because that seems to be something that you're quite passionate about.
One of the hardest role plays is when the student writes it so that the customer is asking them the questions.
Mhm.
And as you watch the video, like you didn't do any asking, they asked you, so you're doing all the talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some people just aren't comfortable with the silence. I'll give you a quick story. It was the second company I'd worked for in Yellow Pages, but I was out with the sales manager, and I actually had more sales experience than the sales manager did.
Hmm.
And we were talking to a customer, and I had asked the customer a question, and he looked at me, and he just sat there. And I won't simulate how long he sat there, but it was a good 45 to 50 seconds of us just looking at each other. Nothing was being said. And he was looking at me, and I was looking at him, and a smile kind of cracked because he knew what was going on here. First one talks loses, right? And my manager starts to say something, and I kicked him, and he like jumped. The guy across the desk smiled, and he said, "I'll think about it." And that was it. We lost the sale. My manager, my sales manager, who was supposed to know everything, was the first one who spoke, and we just walked out. I'm like, oh, but
I'll think
that's
about it.
that's the hardest part is like you said, BJ, just getting them to listen, and that's why I forced them to give the answers to their role play partner. Now, the biggest challenge off of that is now they sit there like this, and they're reading to each other, and that's the hardest part to convey is you've got to somehow either A, own it, or B, figure out how to hide the fact that you're reading the questions. I
Mhm.
don't care if their role play partner is reading because they don't know anything about the business. But you've got to come up with it. And I tell them it's okay. You can take notes. You can have something there where you're going to pretend like you're taking notes because that's what you do on a sales call, right? You ask a question and you want to make sure that you get the answer right. So you've got to take notes on how they're answering your question. So I tell them pretend like you're taking notes so that you have it here, and now you can simulate a real sales call.
You mentioned a little bit ago, you structure these role plays. The other part that BJ actually taught me this way back in the days we first worked together. BJ had shared this idea of like no more winging it. Like we're not winging it anymore as we
Oh,
were doing. We have to do some effective teamwork. But and it's a belief that that we resonate with. Talk to us about that, about the not winging it when it comes to sales, because I think oftentimes salespeople. I'll give you. I look at good sellers when I first started off, and I was like, how in the world did they do that? They just look like they're just speaking off the cuff. But what I came to realize is that they were structured. They had a process, they had a system, and it did it so well, it looked like they were winging it. But it was just that subconscious competence. They just knew what to do. So talk to me about that. How do you do that, and why are you so passionate about not winging it?
when I went through my first sales training class, there was a 10-step process that we had to use.
What was that
And
first class that you did? What was the first training you did?
it was my yellow page. I was 1993, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Went through a yellow page sales class. It was 3 weeks in the class, 4 weeks in the field.
My goodness.
And that first week, you had to memorize a 12-page script, and you had to write it word for word on. So you started on Monday, and on Friday you had to write the script. And if you didn't get the script, you didn't come back on the next Monday.
Wow.
So what I did was I read the script, and again, this is how old I am. I read it into a tape recorder, and I would just play it in my Walkman, and that's how I learned. It was just over and over and over again. And my first sales call out after sales training, I made it through because I did write the script. First sales call, uh, I'm going through. I got my first appointment, and I'm talking, and this guy asks me a question. He goes, "Excuse me, but what about this?" And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, but that's on page 7, and I'm only on page 4. So if
No,
you
you
bear
did
with
not.
me, I will get to it." My sales trainer looked at me. What I ended up walking out with the sale because the guy appreciated that I was honest. I just I again, you structure the sales call of you do your intro, and then you start your discovery method, and then you're going to present your product, and then you go for the close, and it just moves smoothly. Now I took the 10 steps down into 4 right there. Well, you could always go with your follow up as step 5, but to me, I'm a very linear thinker, so it's easy to just if you teach them, look, there's 5 steps or 4 steps, however many steps you want to create. If you just follow the process, it as long as you know that that person can use your product,
Hmm.
it's up to you to find out how they can use it. And that again, that goes back to the discovery mode, but it's knowing that yes, they can actually benefit from your product or your service.
I love it. Love that.
So, Rich, I mean, we know that Oklahoma State has a fantastic kind of sales background and a sales program. One of the things we really respect about you and Oklahoma State in general is that you go beyond the classroom. Can you talk a little about some of those things you do, the sales competitions you do in-house, some of the out-of-state sales competitions that you travel to, how you prepare students, and just kind of how that adds to the sales culture within the school, even if the students aren't competing in it, just knowing that sales is a legitimate career that this school prepares me for.
Trying to decide where I want to start with that. So when I came in, I was part of the um, Center for Sales and Service Excellence, and we didn't have a team because I think the program was only a year and a half old. We didn't have a sales competition team per se, but we started to do in-house sales competitions where, again, role plays. I think there were 4 to 6 minutes of role playing, gotten to 15 or 20 minutes now. But they do an internal competition, and based off of that, they take the top maybe 10 students and they formed a competition team. Now, I took a team of four to Kansas 2 years ago and competed in an outside sales competition. I We didn't make the top three, but I think we did pretty well, being our first competition off site. I stepped away from the sales center to get into the sports marketing and sports sales and revenue generation. But that program has continued to really flourish to the point where they win contests all the time. If you go on LinkedIn, you'll see that they won another one. You know, I think they won two or three of them last year. What I did was with the sports marketing and sports sales, we hooked up with Baylor and Lane Wakefield down there, and we ended up going to Atlanta this past January, I should say. And I had one student who cracked the top 16 in the ticket sales category, and one student who cracked the top 32 in the sponsorship sales. We brought a third student with us who was just there to interview and kind of see what it's all about. And all three of them, based on their competition results as well as their interview skills, all three of them were actually offered jobs in the professional sports world
It's
at the
crazy.
conference, which that's what you're looking for. That's the whole reason why we do this, right? Is to set them up for future success. Now, unfortunately, none of the three accepted those jobs, for various reasons. But just the fact that they were offered the jobs was a pretty cool result.
That is awesome. I'm sitting here taking notes down some of these insights. Absolutely love it. The fact that I feel like imagine the confidence a student gets once they are able to take the stuff from the classroom or from the practice session and to actually get results like that, whether the competition or it was totally validated where these companies hired them. I had one student, she took an assignment, she did the assignment, it was to reach out to different companies, and she was able to get an internship. And it was just like really cool for me. It was exciting for me, but it was exciting for her that she was able to see the result from it. And I think that's probably, if we would encapsulate everything that we talked about today for me, like I feel like that role play, the not winging it, having structure, and even down to like taking these things and with the rich history you guys have with sales competitions and doing stuff outside the classroom, all that reinforces sales rather than just teach sales. We don't want them to end up saying page that's on page 9, right?
Yeah,
I think you
the
got
look on your face, Don, was priceless.
you got them knowing, and they can behave no matter what page or the question comes from, and I think that's a powerful thing. So amazing testament to what you guys are doing and what you're doing in the classroom there. Congratulations on
Well,
that.
I appreciate that. As we kind of talked about keeping it real and telling those stories in class and the experiences that look not perfect.
Hmm.
We goof up or screw up just as much as anybody else. But the nice thing is, if you have that structure, it's easy to get back to. It's easier to find your way back to it if you have prepared and you have that structure and you have a sales. What's the word I'm looking for? A sales process per se that you can follow. So that's kind of what I preach is, as we all say, trust the process, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
love it. BJ, you got a thought before we wrap up?
So, Rich, as we wrap up here, is there any other kind of lasting or piece of advice that you want to leave our audience with that you've learned over the years around teaching professional selling?
The one I wouldn't call it. I don't like giving advice, right? I'll give you an opinion rather than giving you advice because at least an opinion is coming from me, whereas if I give them advice and they follow it, it doesn't work, then it was like, uh-oh. But I tell them, be honest. You have to be honest. I learned the hard way. If you start telling stories or not being honest with your customers, it's going to come back to bite you. And we all know that it's way easier to remember the truth or an honest statement than it is to remember what you may or may have not have made up. So that's the one thing as I say, be honest, be truthful, and you know what? If you can't help them, that's okay too.
That's really
Love it.
powerful. Really powerful. Thank you, Rich, for us all to remember both in sales and just life in general.
Yeah.
So let's say someone's listening today and they really like some of the nuggets that you gave. What would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, they can always find me on LinkedIn, Rich Kuzmeski, and I believe it's spelled correctly on the screen there. And they can always email me at rich.kuzmeski@okstate.edu.
All right.
Those are probably the easiest ways to find me.
Well, I'll just end then by saying thank you so much for being on. Also, since BYU and Oklahoma State are both in the Big 12, and we're going to meet again this year, I hope you do really well, except for the game where you play us.
Blah, blah, blah.
Amen. What BJ say there, Rich?
Hey, I'm a huge fan of you guys, so keep up the good work. I love everything you've done with the textbook and the course. So nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much,
it.
Rich. Really appreciate you.